Hello, everyone, and welcome to Event Icons. Today, we're talking about transparency in the events industry. It seems like a topic that's a real hot button issue, and I know everyone's got an opinion about it. But recently, Brandt and I had a conversation about this, and we realized, man, this should be a whole episode of Event Icons. And let's start the debate as far as what does transparency mean? What does it look like? And we brought some amazing guests to talk about it. So let's get rocking and rolling. Let's cue that intro.
It's Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern, so you know what that means. It's time for another episode of #Event Icons.
Presented by Endless Events.
The show where you get to ask the icons of the events industry anything. Use the question panel on the webinar to submit your questions. Or you can hop on Twitter. Submit your questions with #Event Icons.
We'll be answering your questions live during the entire show.
Before we get started, the more people we have watching, the better conversation we can have. So please help share #Event Icons on Twitter and Facebook.
Just tell your friends to watch at www.event-icons.com.
Now, without any further delay, this is #Event Icons.
As I said, hey everyone, this is Will Curran from Endless Events. I am joined by the amazing Brandt Krueger, or the illustrious Brandt Krueger. I'm not doing the adjectives on this show, am I? But Brandt's joining actually today as a guest. Brandt, thank you so much for joining us today.
I'm glad to be here. It's just fun to have the tables turned a little bit.
Took it turned up, and we are definitely going to be having a little bit of a debate and a fun conversation today. But we're not just Brandt Krueger joined to us today. You'll see there is also an amazing guest who we've been trying to get on the show for a real long time, and it's Jacqueline Bernstein. And Jacqueline is basically the most crazy, well-awarded person I think I've met in the events industry. Like literally Hall of Fame for event solutions, New York's chapter of ILEA's Hall of Legends as well. Like, Jacqueline, you're just like amazing. I'm so glad we finally got you on the show. Jacqueline, thank you so much for joining us today.
I'm honored and humbled. Thank you very, very much.
And Jacqueline's actually got a lot of really cool opinions as far as what does transparency mean and all this sort of things. So I'm not going to like burst a bubble and start too early. But because, Jacqueline, you haven't ever been on the show before, we do have to ask the standard question. So everyone can get a little bit of background as far as, where you come from and, what got you in the events industry. So can you share a little bit about what got you in the events industry and what got you to where you are today and what does Empire Force do and all that sort of stuff?
Okay, well, thank you. I'm going to make a very long story very, very short, but I'm going to add a couple of tidbits in there that'll just be fun to hear. Where am I from? Can't you tell? I am from Brooklyn, New York City, and very proud. And I was president of my class all 4 years in college, which decided I wanted to be, at the time we called it corporate party planner. I researched the industry and I started working at an event production and destination management company right out of college. Worked there for a few years, and actually 25 years ago in June, my business partner Robert Holzmeyer and I bought the company from the previous owner, and we created Empire Force Events, and it'll be about 5 years ago that we bought into the Access brand. So now we operate as Access New York Metro here in New York City, New York State, New Jersey, Connecticut. And we are now the longest independently owned destination management company here in New York City, as our company started way too long ago for me to have been there at that time at all, but in 1982, so it's 37 years. So we're very proud event producers and really have a love for bringing that event production into the destination management side of the profession.
Amazing. And I think that it's going to be really, really cool to get your opinion, because I think that I very much come from this on the supplier end. So it's going to be very cool to hear it from kind of the client's perspective as well, which would be fantastic. So again, thank you for joining us, Jacqueline. But Brandt's here as well, and you guys might be thinking like, well, if Brandt's a guest, what does that exactly mean? So Brandt, can you tell everyone a little bit about so obviously you come from the AV kind of aspect and the technical aspect of which we originally discussed about with this. Well, what's kind of your thought process? Why do you think that you're here? Why are you here?
Why am I here? I mean, really, let's just get down to it. No, so like you said, this evolved a bit out of a conversation, but for me personally, it goes back further than that. So I'll keep my story condensed as well, and just go back and watch any of the previous episodes that I've been on. But the long and the short of it is, I used to work for a production company here in Minneapolis for about 16, 17 years. And I went out on my own and started my own consulting and freelance technical business about 5 years ago. But while I was still at that production company, I had started to dip my toes in this social world, and I'm on Twitter, and I start to speak at conferences and things like that. I'm coming out of my event shell. I know you're all shocked that at one point I was very, internal. But as I'm starting to do that, I'm doing sessions on, this is, on AV, the AV 101 type stuff, right? Really simple stuff that to me was just basic information. Like, hey, you guys as planners should know this information so that we can then have a better conversation. And I was really surprised when some people at that, it wasn't management, but some people at that company approached me and they said, why are you telling people this stuff?
Mhm.
You're giving away the farm here. It's like, do we want people knowing, how mixers work and things like that? Because I think they saw that as, hey, this is where we hide, profit and stuff like that. And, there were other things as well that I didn't quite agree with as far as how we did pricing and things like that. And I always wanted us to move to a much more flat rate. Hey, this is the management fee. This is how much it costs. And then we pass through all of the other, the AV bid and all that kind of stuff would get passed through. Now, I never moved into sales with that company. So I didn't get, as an operations guy, I didn't get much wind behind my sails on putting that forward. But so that was kind of the kernel for me, that even something as basic as what you and I talk about all the time, Will, of AV 101 stuff, there was still this like pushback of, wow, should we really be telling people this stuff? And that kind of blew my mind.
I definitely think that we have very much the same mentality, and I definitely echo that same thing. I mean, this is gonna be a weird episode because I definitely have a horse in the race when it comes to this one too. But I think we're gonna have a really, really great conversation. So let's start with something really, really simple. And it's ironic because I remember watching a video last night, and they said the worst way to start an essay is with the definition of a word. But I do think the definition of what transparency means is important in this conversation, because I think what transparency is different for every single person. And so actually, I'm going to kick this one to Jacqueline first, because you actually pre-show were like talking about this. I was like, whoa, save it for the show, save it for the show. What does it mean to be transparent to you? And how do you define transparency specifically with your company? And then do you think it's different? Well, we'll get to that one a little bit later, but maybe what does transparency mean to you guys as a company in your culture?
Okay. And it was interesting when you were just talking before, when you said, you see us as the client. Yes, we are the client if we're getting you utilizing your audiovisual technical production services. But I was really focusing, which is what I'm going to answer right now, on our clients, the end user, the actual stakeholder, the investor in the event, the one signing the final check or wiring the money, right? So for us, the transparency part, that is what we embrace here at our culture, is engaging the conversation with the client on what they want to see when it comes to, we're speaking about pricing here predominantly with the transparent parts of our business. So we might have a way that we want to price, or many different ways that we do price, but we like to be transparent and have an open dialogue with our clients to understand how they need it priced. Even the same client, but a different project, or even the same client, same project, but different elements of that project. There are certain elements that potentially could be priced differently. So we start with being transparent and having a very open, honest dialogue with the client on how they want to see pricing. We've been told by some friendly competitors, some of our colleagues that are outside of the business or not, that why would you do that? Why would you speak to your client, ask them why to have a see it priced? You should set your prices and that's it. And we're feeling that in the service end of the profession, and how everything is so transparently easy to procure directly. I know you did a podcast recently just on, commoditizing our profession, that we feel part of our service is being transparent again and having this conversation and seeing what works for the client and how they want to see pricing. And the fees then could be a whole nother conversation. Is it percentage? Is it flat fees? I don't know how anyone works hourly, because if we ever actually add up the hours that we work in this profession, we never would get paid our true value. So we feel that we want to ask clients, this is a funny way I put this conversation quite often, what would make you comfy? Comfy. I love the word comfy. It sounds more comfy than comfortable in seeing our pricing presented to you. And for the most part, some clients sit back and say, wow, no one's ever asked me this before. I have no idea how I want to see my pricing. I'm just used to just getting it. I said, well, if you could decide how you saw the pricing and what would be great, maybe not only to you, but maybe there is another decision maker, someone that you're reporting to that's making a final decision. How do you think that our prices, our services are valued, and how do you think it should be presented? So that's where it starts before we get into the nitty gritty of actual dollar amounts or percentages.
Ooh, I think that's really important. Brandt, like what does transparency mean to you?
First of all, I love that comfy idea that just
Yeah.
being straight up and being like, so how do you want to see this?
I want
And
to get my Snuggie and like
yeah,
get ready to plan an event.
I love that. I mean, for me, it's about being absolutely upfront about things. And so, right away in conversations that I have with my clients, I say, I don't take commissions. And
Perfect.
so if you're trying to, I don't take commissions, and I don't add any markup to anything that I'm bringing to you. You're paying me to, be your technical producer. And so I'm going to come in and I'm going to get 3 AV bids, and I'm going to bring you those actual bids, and so for me, being transparent is being absolutely clear about how you're going to be charged and what you're going to be charged. And then, the other kind of side of the coin, as far as I'm concerned, is what we started with, which is education. And so, part of transparency for me is educating the client. Hey, this is why this works this way. This is why this is charged this way. So being clear and upfront about you and your business practices, but also being clear as far as, how things work in the industry. And this is why this AV company charges this much in this city and this much in this city, even though they're under the same brand, and explaining why that is in clear, easy to understand way.
And I think that's really important too, is like figuring out, what is the clear and easy to understand way, I think is so important, because far too often do we not explain it in a clear to understandable way. How do you think that we can create transparency? Because I think that's the biggest worry too, is like, I want to make it transparent, but I also want to make it easy for everyone. And I like that, Jacqueline, you said like, I want to make it comfy. So you're getting them and setting the stage for them to say, hey, what does this look like? But how do you think that we can create transparency, but also with ease at the same time?
Well, we also ask our clients quite often, when we don't really have, they use the word budget. I think the word budget is a horrible word. Budget always sounds low. It's a budget. You're budgeting for something. Whereas we always ask them, what is your financial investment in this event? Financial investment. They're now thinking they're investing something, and they should be investing something. Their time, their effort, their job, whatever it may be. We only do corporate. We don't do social events. You can only imagine what the weddings and mitzvahs, they're investing, their heart and soul and blood into that. So when we ask what their financial investment is, and they most of the time cannot answer, either they really don't know because they don't know what the value is, or they don't actually have a number. So we're asking them, when we're giving them then our pricing, again, however we're doing the pricing, we're then asking them when they come back and say, that seems a little high, wasn't really what I was expecting. So we ask them, well, what do you think that value is of that element to you? Because any of us can just reduce the price by a couple of percentage points or a couple of dollars just for the sake of reducing. We tell us to clients, we could still provide the same great service. We're just going to lower the price and just do you a favor. Then you kind of put them on the spot there, not intentionally, but either you want the centerpiece to be less expensive and we take out some of the flowers in it, or we just reduce the price and give you exactly what we were giving to you at a different price, but we've been transparent and said we're just going to make less money and still deliver it. And then we let the clients to decide. A lot of clients sometimes, when you ask them, be transparent back to us and tell us, what do you think you should be investing in this? For the most part, they can't always seem to articulate that, because I don't think a lot of clients, again, I know there's clients that are listening on this podcast, but a lot of other planners internally in corporations or organizations might just not necessarily know what the value is, which is why they're coming to companies like us to innovate, resource it, coordinate, be on site, load it in, load it out, make sure it's all running there. That's what you're paying the additional service fees for. I know that markup word is used behind the scenes, kind of a back of house word, but either you're going to buy it direct and make sure it's all taken care of, all those elements that we just discussed, all the service parts, or you're going to buy it through us and you're going to pay additional fees in order that you financially invested for the service to be done. So we think it's a reciprocal conversation for them to really understand what they're investing financially.
Ooh, Brandt?
I mean, it's a great piece of advice that I was given when I was first going out on my own, to always, always, always on the final bill, put the actual cost on there. And then any discounts are taken off of that, so that you're getting that amount out there, so that every invoice that you send out has the actual amount that you feel you should be charging for that service, or should be charging for that actual piece of equipment or something like that. And then you say, negotiated discount or added discount or something like that below it. Honestly, I think that is another bit of transparency, right? So instead of us just going, okay, mark that down, or Will, you see this all the time in AV world, where we'll only charge you for 3 days when actually you're using it for 4. Well, if you're using it for 4, you should probably put it as for 4 and then have a discount or something at the bottom, because you're starting to manipulate the numbers at that point. But it's something we see all the time. It's something we do all the time. And so when we're talking about transparency, to a certain extent, we're talking about honesty, but honesty implies that people are being dishonest if they're not. Whereas transparency is more about not only being honest, but being clear, and not either intentionally or unintentionally hiding things in the numbers.
For sure. Yeah. I think that's really interesting too. You bring up the point, the difference in honesty versus transparency as well, because a lot of times too, like you're hoping that everybody's 100% honest all the time, right? But then transparency is kind of like this filter then in between that kind of happens. I think one of the interesting points that we can kind of go through too is that, do you guys feel like there's a part of the industry that really needs to start getting more transparent, that you think is not as transparent? So I think like part of the conversation that kind of came up, and when we just discussed this, and Jacqueline, I think one reason why we wanted to make sure that we had you on this show is that, for example, DMCs who are, building out the pricing, and we hear it all the time. DMCs say like, "Oh, can you hide a kickback in here?" Or, "Hey, can you not put your logo on this, and can I put my logo instead?" Or for example, I've had it as well where, "Hey, don't email the client directly, even though I'm going to CC you on the emails. You aren't allowed to contact them." Like, where's that kind of what's kind of like? Do you think there's areas of the events industry that need to start becoming more transparent, Jacqueline?
I love that you just brought up about hiding the logos and all. I spoke around the profession, the industry, and the world about destination magic companies working with vendors such as yourself in the technical side. And I used to talk about, I should resurrect that. I'm doing it here. The case of the hidden identity, where the destination magic company would say to the tech production company, when you roll your road cases into the ballroom, I can't have my client see on your case, the road case, your identity of your logo. And I always say to that DMC, our responsibility, our job, what our side of the profession is, that we're managing all these services in a destination. There is no reason a client should ever think that this destination magic company owns technical equipment and has road cases to do that. Then they're a technical production company, okay? So they should want to promote the identity and be transparent, not be so hidden of who that tech company is, to be able to say, "Hey client, as your preferred DMC that you've now engaged in this destination, I am using XYZ tech production company for your event. And maybe I've used them for others. Maybe there's other reasons I use different ones for different, but this is our preferred for what you need for your event. And I am proud for you to see their identity on the road cases that are being pushed by." This doesn't mean that the client's going to go behind that road case and ask the tech guy, "Hey, what are you charging for these Leco lights, and you could work with us direct and you could pay us direct." That has nothing to do with it. The client will have hopefully bought into using a DMC or an event company to provide that service, and be proud that they're introducing their partners to the table. It's not that hidden where the band leader is going to give out his card anymore. They should be proud of that identity. So I love that you brought that up, because I always feel that that's what DMCs many times are so concerned about, that they're afraid that their clients realize that they don't own anything. But inherently, that's not what their role is. The role is a general contractor, bringing the right partners to the table and managing that team and all the services that are provided. So as far as when you ask what else should be more transparent, it's interesting. I loved hearing you say, Brandt, about not taking any commissions. We don't take any commissions either. We tell our clients, if the venue rental is $100,000 and we get a 10% commission, we're extending that to you as a discount. So now our lowest cost, because we have such relationships here, is at $90,000, and then we're going to add our fees, and potentially it's going to cost more than the $100,000 that you might have paid directly, because you're paying us for a service to do that. There should be no shame, and this is something we should all be transparent about, in making money in this profession. We are a for-profit organization. We are planning live experiences, and that takes a lot of work to do, with a lot of other elements behind the scenes. So we should be transparent about the fact that just because you order that centerpiece and it might cost us $100, but we might charge you, I don't want to start getting into numbers here because we don't want to price fix on a podcast, $110 or $150 or anywhere in between. That's because we provided the service of designing that centerpiece, making sure that it's there on site, paying all the vendors, tipping the elevator man. I just had this discussion at an event in New York City last night, that those are real costs that aren't necessarily a line item in what you're writing the check to, let's say, the florist that you bought the centerpiece from. Okay, so that's where we have to be transparent to explain to clients, not about just revealing prices, but revealing to them what is involved in making that centerpiece show up on that table, or what was involved for us to have a relationship with that venue to get that. Again, we don't take the commission, but would get that discount in order to pass that along to you. That's where transparency is. It's not just cost plus. We wrote a check to the restaurant for $100 for dinner, and I'm charging you $100 plus whatever my fee is, flat, percentage, combination, etc. It's really transparent about what this entails. And any client that doesn't respect the work that goes into this, we should have that more comfy conversation so they understand where we're coming from.
I could do a half an hour on commissions. I mean, it's
Yeah.
one of the things that it's what's
We got 40
really,
more minutes left,
yeah.
Brandt.
What's bizarre to me is that it's so much easier to not go down that road, right? It's actually way easier for me to be transparent and to pass things through and to just say, you know what, here's what I charge per hour. And whatever the bid is going to be the bid. But being in the event technology side, I get calls every day from some new event tech platform that, okay, we want to show you our thing. But then at the end of the call, they're like, all right, now we want to, if you recommend us, we'll give you a 15%, we'll give you a 10%. And every time I just say, you know what, then give me a 15% discount.
Yep.
So that I can just pass that through. And then people who want to use you through me are going to get a fantastic discount. And, so you're not having to, then it's easier for you. It's easier for me. It's easier for them. So this idea, and again, it's not dishonesty. It's just not being transparent. I was blown away when it was last year when the whole hotel commissions thing went through.
Mm-hmm.
And
I start dropping their commission.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so I read it and went, that's interesting. But I couldn't believe how much the industry exploded on that. Maybe this shows my naivety, that I didn't understand how important that commission structure was to small to medium planners that are working through and getting those commissions and counting on that as part of their pay. I was truly blown away by the reaction and how long and how deep and how passionate of a reaction it was when that started happening.
Well, I remember when the news happened too, people panicked that they're like, oh my gosh, now my clients know what this is. And now they're going to ask me about it. And I don't remember it ever being a conversation before this all happened. And now it's seems like we're talking about it every day and people having explained it and, all these things like that. I wanted to give a little bit of anecdotalness to transparency. Obviously, I think the AV industry can be way more transparent. So that's where I will always come from. But what's the interesting thing for me, anecdotal stories, that for those who don't know, Endless model is kind of unique. Two things. We don't have any physical office space. We're all 100% remote. And that usually brings the second question of, well, if you're all remote, where's all your equipment? And then we usually follow up with, hey, we don't own any of our own equipment. I'm not here to pitch Endless, and I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to know how we do it, I'm happy to explain it and how we're able to get great pricing. But I can't tell you how much benefit that I've gotten from being transparent. And we make it the reason why we do a demo is so we can explain this to people and why it's a benefit and everything like that. And when I first started in the AV industry, I was terrified to tell people I rented gear. We thought we had to own all of our gear. And if anyone ever asked oh, where's that wind light coming from? We'd be like, oh, we own that thing, and we'd be afraid to let them see logos and all these things like that. But then I realized when you're transparent up front, yes, you're going to lose clients occasionally. That will be oh, I can just go direct, or how dare you rent it? We're going to go with the company that owns it. Cool. But I can't tell you when you're transparent, and technically now at this point honest as well, you end up being so relieved. And you realize that there's people who are totally cool with working remote. And then the benefit is I figured out the way to explain it properly. And that's the problem with transparency too. I think sometimes you don't know how to explain it properly. So therefore I'm going to just hide it. Right. But if you can explain it properly, boom, like all of a sudden people are like, I actually loved that model. That's so cool. And, I can talk about that one for days, I think.
Well, and it's one of those, again, it's not a dirty little secret, but it's just one of those facts that suddenly a light gets shown on of every audiovisual company rents gear. If they don't own it, they have to rent it. It's just that's just the way that it is. So again, trying to pretend and covering up road cases with tape and things like that is just, it's so much more complicated than just being transparent.
Well, and I'd love to add to that, because many times, let's using the tech production side of it, if we're engaging a company to utilize, to do whatever the technical production and AV services there are, and we're asking for something they don't necessarily have, we're cool with the fact that they're telling us they don't own it. We're also cool with the fact that they are going to rent it out from somewhere else. And I have to tell you this, we're really cool with the fact that they're going to add money for their work to get that done, because we've made the investment in that vendor partner for them to go get that done on our behalf, as opposed to now us bringing in another tech company. Why? So we can get it for a little bit less, but now we have to deal with coordinating that vendor, paying that vendor, making room for that vendor on the loading dock, in and out, more footprint in the room. So it makes sense to financially invest for that vendor to rent it. And we use this example all the time with clients. Why are you charging me X amount for that linen? I can get it online for $20. I said, and then maybe you should get it online for $20. However, that linen though has to somehow get to that venue. It has to be inventoried. It has to be thrown on that table. It has to be shook out the other night, has to be packaged up, and it has to be shipped back. So if you want to do that, we get it. But if we rent it, we're going to build that price. We bundled package pricing. We're not necessarily going to say the linen's $20, but then here's all the services and the person going to FedEx and doing this. I have to get someone there early in the morning to inventory. Well, they're going there at early morning. I got to pay for a taxi as opposed to public transportation. There's so much that goes into building that pricing that we're hoping the client understands, you know what? I don't want to be involved in that. And then there are times where we make a decision internally that we're not going to rent that linen. And even though the client said you're doing it, we're going to rent it then. Let's say have the caterer do it, because it just made sense to have it shipped to them and have them shaking out the breadcrumbs and getting that taken care of. We then have to decide, is that part of our investment financially to have them get that, or do we build that into our pricing that we're then charging the client? But there's no shame in explaining to clients how the services get done. We want to be proud in explaining amount of the team members that get into getting that linen on the table or the centerpiece there, or having the chosen tech production partner and what they're doing behind the scenes to make that all happen. So that's where the transparency comes in. It's not just about the price. And I want to go back, Brandt, to what you were saying about invoicing. It seems to get lost in the dialogue in a conversation when you're on the phone with the client. Don't worry, we joke about this. We'll throw the balloons in for you for free, or we're going to reduce that by 10%, or yeah, we'll throw that staff in, or it gets lost in an email. It's very important to have that on the final reconciliation. So this way the value is seen there. We do a lot of times at the end of our invoices, resultant savings. So you're able to see, I love the happy dance you're doing there while I'm talking.
I'm snapping. I'm doing my jazz snaps for you.
Just Jack. We're happy to show those resultant savings so the client, again, sees the value of what we've done, and then that comfy conversation that we've worked on together. It's non-negotiation, because I think negotiation has a negative connotation, just like the word budget. Negotiation sounds like I'm going to negotiate and I'm going to get something from you that I really didn't think I should get, or I'm going to beat you up to get it. That's a horrible word. I also don't like the word concessions either. It shouldn't be a concession. I want to give this to you freely. I want us to come to an agreement. We got to make money here. We still have to pay our team to get the services done. But how can we make that all work again? That's comfy for us.
Conversation.
Showing those resultant savings is so important. And then we're being fully transparent on what something might have entailed financially for you to invest in and what we were able to do for you. It's almost, we don't have anyone in our company with the name sales in their profession, in their title, in their positions, but we engage them, we manage the account. That is a way to encourage clients to come back to you more by what you've given to them, not only price-wise reduction, but also the service to get it done.
Wow. There's
Amen, sister.
yeah, I think this is getting everyone all riled up because my gosh, the chat is
Chat is
Uh-oh.
blowing up.
Uh-oh.
blowing up, and I have a million questions. We're testing out a simulcast of LinkedIn Live, and we're testing that out. That's blowing up as well. So we're gonna get to all your guys' questions. But if you do have questions, leave them in the chat. Obviously, event-icons is where we're gonna prioritize our questions because those people are blowing up that chat right there. But if you have questions, post them in the chat in the comments. Let us know what you want to know. So we're gonna get into some of these questions. Quick fire. First of all, hello from Denise Pugh Malo. She has a question, one of your friends. She knows you very well. She said, as you know, we share the same business model and ethics, yet question, when does the transparency corner get turned for you guys? Is it at the RFP process or the contract phase? So I think that's a great question for both of you guys.
Hi, Denise. Can I give a little shout out? She's
Yeah,
with
for sure. Let's do it.
Destination Management in New Orleans. She's one of my closest confidants and friends in the profession here. I think what you're asking the question is, when do you start the conversation about being transparent? It has
basically.
to start on the initial phone call. So something else that we're also transparent about, clients send RFPs, and obviously we all get them through email. I've been getting DMs on Insta coming to me, hey, I have an event for you. Hey, and they always start with hey, right? Or even in Facebook Messenger, or even just a random text. I was thinking about you, want to work on your event. We will not send a proposal without speaking with the client live. We innovate and produce live experiences. Why wouldn't we do that initially to talk with them about the event that we're going to produce live for them? It seems oxymoronic if we don't. Now, they might just say, just send me some simple pricing for transfers, a very core destination management service. But we feel if we're having a conversation with that client, a new client, or even a client we worked with before, but maybe new type of services, that we have to ask that right from the very beginning, how do you want to see your pricing? And you know what the usual answer is? We want to see a broken out line item. Of course we do. You're not going to tell us you have $250,000 to invest in this event. We're going to list all the elements and just write 250 at the bottom. We all would love to do that, but that's not feasible. But we're talking about those line items. Do you want to see, when we're renting the museum venue in New York City, inclusive of our fees, bundled in, packaged in, not using the word markup, or do you want to see that at our cost that we get net negotiated, non-commissionable, and then our fees added on? Then that's, oh, I never thought of that. I usually don't see it that way because a lot of DMCs are building those prices in. I'm not going to get into discussion of percentages here, but a lot of times clients said, well, we're used to seeing, just to joke here, 2 and 3%, on top of those fees. Well, I've been around this profession a while. No one's living on those percentages here. And we've discussed what certain percentages are. I don't think it's fair for discussing it here. They might vary in different markets. But then we discussed, do you want to see it as a percentage? Do you want to see it as a flat fee? But the key then is, if you're doing this transparency, then if the scope changes of the elements of the event, you got to make sure you're covered. Let's say you're doing a flat fee to produce that event at that venue, right? That museum that we just decided we're going to show it to you at cost plus. But now you've decided to add a whole nother side event to that, then your fee needs to change. Respectfully, of course, you're providing additional services. But this should be a conversation that should be held officially at the initial intake. I don't want to say qualifying, because a client's calling for an event, they're qualified. Hopefully you can service it, come to an agreement financially and logistically. And if a client then says, price it all inclusively, build your fees in, because sometimes they don't want their manager, I hate to use the word boss, to see that they're using an external planner, because that's what we are. We're the planners, right? For the most part, if we're working with a meeting planner as opposed to, let's say, marketing, et cetera. And then they say, well, now that they've seen your pricing, they want to break it out. You can't go backwards. It doesn't seem like a fair way then to have to take and unbundle everything that you've already do. And one of the last thought about that, which is very important, we had a client that said, let's do everything cost plus. So the dinners were $100, and let's say we charge, $120 a person, right? So 20%, let's say. Client said, wow, I didn't think you were making that much money. I would have been happy to have seen the dinner at $120, but now that I know you're making that $20 per head, that 20%, I think that's too much, so I want to get that reduced. So it's a funny thing how sometimes transparency with certain clients backfired, that this client thought, I'd love to see what things cost, and it's almost a rude awakening for them that they're thinking, wow, everything was costing too much. Who's to say what's too much? So that was where we use the value. What do you think it should be? If you don't think, let's, again, using a round number for purposes of this call, if you don't think it should be 20%, what then you think it should be? So you got to have that conversation up front, Denise, and everyone out there.
Brandt, any thoughts as far as like the process for you? What do you think? When do you think is key?
Early as possible same thing. It's just as early as possible in the conversation. You said something right there at the end, Jacqueline, that reminded me of a speaker that I met, that he said, whenever someone was trying to negotiate his fees, he would actually go back to them and say, well, what do you think that's worth? And it put the onus on them to come back with a counter of, and so he would say, okay, I'm going to be, flying there, and it's time, and I have to prepare and all that kind of stuff. And here's the value that your attendees are going to get out of it. What do you think that's worth? And if the answer is 0, then the answer is 0. And, but the answer was never 0. And that's how actually he was able to find people, to find money in the couch cushions for speaker fees and things like that. Like, oh, we don't pay our speakers. Okay, well, what is that worth? If the answer is 0, then great. So yeah, as early, to answer Denise's question, just as early as possible in the process.
Wow. Yeah,
I know you're skimming through the chat. The chat is like,
really it's there's so much going on right now, and I'm trying to manage the LinkedIn Live. No, it's good. This is exactly what we're looking for. So yeah, I'm gonna concur with everything you guys said. So next question, I'll kind of jump around. There's a big message from Culture Labs. Who I'm gonna try to discern what exactly they're asking. I apologize, but they're wondering, like obviously these preferred relationships with kickbacks are a big part of their business, and it seems like, is it one of those things where you should try to set up preferred relationships with kickbacks and go back to those regularly? What's kind of your guys' relationship? We've talked about transparency to clients, but what about transparency towards vendors as well? Maybe we can go down that route. How do you guys approach the relationships with vendors when you talk to them as well? Do you think that it's fair to say, hey, you have to give us a kickback, otherwise we're not working with you? Or do you think we're gone and past those ways and we should figure out other ways to make money? Brandt, this probably, you talked about a little bit with the technology side of things. What's kind of your thought process?
I turn them into discounts. So if you wanted to give me a 10% commission or a 15% commission, that gets immediately passed through to my client. And if that's something you're uncomfortable doing, that's a warning flag to me. If you're uncomfortable because you think somehow that people will figure out that you're giving commissions to other people or something like that, because I had a few people be like, oh no, we can't do that. Well, what, you can't give me a 15% discount? Because that's weird, but you're okay with giving me a commission. So I think being, again, as clear and early on as possible, and when I'm dealing with AV people, I think there's actually a kind of a nice sort of like when I say, and I'm not going to mark you up. So whatever you give to me, I'm going to, because then they know that they don't have to try and artificially reduce their prices because they know that I'm going to mark it up, and they want the business. So for me, again, as early as possible with my vendors, I'm going to also say, hey, I'm not marking you up. I'm passing this on through to my client.
I would personally love to tell everyone out there in our profession to let's retire the word kickback. That I'm sorry to say that has a very old school social part of the industry, which relies heavily on commission, incentive, discounted rates, or I'll put the bands at the bar mitzvah for $20,000 and the planner says, I'm doing it for free. That planner should also state to the client, I'm paid for my services based on a financial relationship that we have set with my preferred vendors that doesn't necessarily affect you. Now, granted, if you're getting a 10%, let's say, commission on that band might actually cost $18,000. They've made it $20,000, however that may work. But the word kickback just sounds so negative and behind the scenes. I think commission, it's an industry term. And when you talked earlier about hotels, and 10% to 7% that happened out there with first Marriott, and then it carried on with others. We tell our clients this rate is commissionable at the hotel to us because it's a standard to take that, but we're telling them it's commissionable. But quite honestly, we're not servicing anything for 7 to 10%. I have no problem being on this podcast to have many people that are out there that we then charge a professional services fee, and it's based on many different factors that might happen if we're negotiating and contracting the hotel direct on our client's behalf. That then there's other fees. That there should be no shame in someone living on 7 to 10% because then there's meaning additional to that, because then there are other fees that need to be worked on. But when you go back to the beginning of the question about if we're not getting kickbacks or commission, we like to say to our vendors, we're happy for a discount, of course, and we're passing along to the client, whether it's here's the cost, client, and we got a discount, we showed it to them, and we pass along, we add our fees, or we take that price and bundle it. You know, in destination management profession, the core service is a lot of transfer services, moving them to the events that you're doing the tech production for, right? But then we bundle that. We don't necessarily always do cost plus, but then we take that discounted rate and then use that as what we're adding our fees to. So that's great to get discounted rates, but quite honestly for us, and I scream this loud and proud, in a destination that is probably not the easiest to work in, but we're New Yorkers, we got this here in New York, we've been doing it a while, is the service and what you're going to do, what you might throw in that has a value add, as opposed to just taking a couple of, points, not bullet points, excuse me, a couple of percentage points or dollars off the price. It's about the service and being able to say to our clients, this is our preferred vendor for this event, and we get so much more than just a discounted rate. Because the client, again, we can get a discounted rate if we book it direct, as a client finds it on the interweb out there themselves and says, well, I can get at this rate, we get it discounted. But what we're getting is more than just a reduced rate. We're getting the knowledge of working with that vendor and making that work for them. And we hope that clients would respect that.
Yeah, I think you bring up a super duper solid point beyond just the money exchange as well. I was going to echo your guys' feedback as well as a vendor. I can't tell you how many times it comes down to the point where we've shared the quote and they're like, okay, this is what we're going to give to our clients. By like, can you now add a kickback on top of it? Yeah. When my biggest worry is like, if you tell me, most of the time you guys are giving us a budget saying I need to fit in this, and then you're saying you need a kickback. Well, I don't want to like re-engineer my entire quote to make sure they're fitting in this and everything like that. So just make sure that you are very straightforward when it comes to it. And, we have clients that ask for, money back or discounts or whatever it may be. And you just have to let us know as soon as possible. Oh my gosh, there's so many questions to go through. First off, shout out to everyone who's joining us right now. We have a ton of people in the chat, the event-icons chat right now. I always feel bad when it's just AV related questions, because I feel it's like self-fulfilling, but I think AV is one of the least transparent places. Obviously, I said that a little bit earlier. The question that we're getting from Denise as well, that's a good question. I think this is one that hasn't been quite asked. Like, how do you manage transparency when you're hired by a client's traveling AV producer that then hires you on the ground for your services? So Brandt, you do a lot of management of AV and kind of producing of shows. Kind of what's your thought process around this question?
Well, I'm trying to follow it, so I'm not sure I totally understand the question.
Yeah, maybe Denise, can you provide a little clarification on that question in the chat, and then we can come back to it in a sec. Oh my gosh. Let's see. Here we go. Let's go to another question. We got, since we're being so transparent, is 7 to 10 points. What is standard within vendor commission, or do you feel that it varies by industry? So as far as discounts and things like that, do you guys have any suggestions as far as where you would go with it?
It's a funny concept when percentages sometimes work in your favor. When you're dealing with large volume and you're just adding a percentage on, you make more money. When the client orders a lobster dinner over the chicken dinner and we're working on percentages, we make more money because it costs more. But then the negative can be when you're dealing with a small volume and you just use that an industry standard, which again, who's to say what's standard per your question, that if it's so low, there are times when we might say our fee is based on a percentage of these elements, and then but at a minimum of X amount of dollars in order for us to be there in service. But when you talk about discounts, I don't even like to necessarily ask vendors for a discount right away. I'm actually a purist and an idealist, thinking that we're getting great rates because we're a fabulous partner to them and we're giving them good service, and they're just giving us great rates. But if they say this is discounted at 10% or 5%, I'm not stupid. Obviously, there's a difference there in the dollar amount, but I don't know if it's for us then to say what we think the discount should be. That's why when clients say, ooh, this seems a little expensive, I'm like, well, you tell us what you think. What would you want to invest in that? Invest. Not just what do you want to cost you, because cost you sounds negative. What do you want to invest in that? Well, what have you seen other companies do? Help engage us, help teach us. Because I've been around, but I learned something every day talking to a client and asking what they've seen elsewhere in another destination or companies that are like us. But I think maybe a clear answer because I talk a lot here, to give to that what the typical percentage might be ranges somewhere between that 5 and 10%. But there have been times where we've talked to a client and something was such a hot button for them that was so important that, we've thrown it in for free, or we're giving it to it 50% off, just whatever has a perceived value as well. It's because then a percentage markup doesn't always work, where something might cost $10 and it's fair to charge $30 for it. And some might say that's a crazy percentage markup, but it makes sense based on what the value is there and also what it takes to execute that to be at the event. You can't forget about the labor. It's not just the on-site labor putting a centerpiece down. It's all that goes on behind the scenes, as well as knowing the right vendor to call. Knowing that we're going to call that museum over this museum, and you want to do the event on this night, or that Italian restaurant's better than this one just down the block, is part of the service that you're investing in when you're bringing in a partner like us to do that. And then, so I know I've answered, I brought a lot of other topics in there. I don't have a clear answer to what a percentage discount may be. I have to see what the vendor partner feels comfortable extending to us.
I think that's a great answer. Okay, a lot of questions, more questions to go through. I'm gonna try to fit a couple more in, unless Brandt has an answer to.
Well, yeah, I went back and reread Denise's question. I want to take a stab at it if I can. And so she's asked, so question for the AV folks, how do you manage transparency when you are hired by the client's traveling AV producer that then hires you on the ground? And so what I think she's kind of getting at is you've been hired by someone else. How do you handle the transparency in there? And I think much to Jacqueline's kind of comfy analogy, transparency rolls downhill, but it doesn't roll uphill very well. And so I try and meet and match the transparency of whoever that's hired me. And so I do have some clients that have me dressed in their polos.
Yep.
And I act as them, and and if somebody were to ask me for my card, I would say, I'm going to have you go through them and get back to you, that kind of stuff.
Go talk to John.
And yeah, or if you've got, and if you've got vendors, that's kind of the unspoken rule of the vendors, if you've hired a band and someone goes to the band, and says, can I have your card? The unspoken rule is, well, you have to go talk to them. That's the kind of thing that happens. So I try to match whatever the transparency level is of whoever is above me, what they're comfortable with. If, however, that starts to get really uncomfortable for me, then I'm out, and then I have to look at whether or not I want to continue to have that person as a client. But for the most part, it's stuff like that, putting on someone else's shirt or saying, yes, I'm with them, or, they'll even give you an email with their organization just because they want all things to flow through them.
Can I just answer that? Because I think also where Denise is going with this question is, with that tech producer coming in via the client, it's like the client's vendor, but they're utilizing you, is that this happens quite often where a client says, I found the greatest juggler that I love to perform at our events. I'd like you to hire him directly. I'm joking with jugglers. And we say to the client, well, here's what the contract is, because you've worked with them direct. We're not going to mark it up and hidden and build things in. And then we discuss what the appropriate fee would be. So I think, again, because that vendor came via the client, is to be very open and transparent and ask the client, it's almost like you're asking the client what the market will bear. It's not a negative, but what do you get? You think the value is to turnkey it to us to service, because we have a lot of clients that say, I want to use this restaurant and I want to use that entertainer. And then you're thinking, well, my work is done. Sometimes that's a great thing, right? I don't have to research it. I don't have to propose it. They've told us what to do, but we're still going to be servicing it. So what's the value in that service of what we're going to then provide that service and what the client wants to invest in it?
I want to tell a real quick story along those kind of lines of the stuff flowing uphill and downhill. That, we're in a situation where I arranged AV for a client, and it was the in-house, and not unbeknownst to me, the person above me then marked it up. And so then the bill wound up coming attached to the master bill. And so literally we were in this like bizarre situation where the AV, the salesperson from the hotel came and brought in the master bill, and we could see the AV portion sticking out of it. And like the client is like trying to distract the end client while we remove the AV section out. It was this like bizarre, silent movie thing going on, and that made me so uncomfortable to find out what was going on there, and that had been marked up and all this kind of stuff. And so it's very difficult when you find yourselves in those situations, as the level of transparency either flows up or down the hill.
Wow. um, I think this has just been such a great conversation, and there's so many questions
And
to be
another example,
asked.
it's so much easier to just be transparent. I mean, none of those shenanigans had to happen,
Yeah,
right? If
totally.
if the whole chain up and down it was transparent,
For
we
sure.
wouldn't have had to be doing this ridiculous thing.
For sure. All right, guys. We don't have unlimited time, unfortunately. We are coming to the end, and this is an amazing conversation. But I think we covered a lot of it with some of our general points that we had. So probably pretty much most of the questions that you guys are asking, just go back to that point of just be more transparent. I think that's probably the biggest endpoint that we've had with this episode for sure. So just absolutely amazing. The chat's just absolutely blowing up all over me right now. So like I'm trying to like answer all of your questions, but before we end the show, I do want to do our last two final questions we do for every show. So let's start off with the easy one, which is what is your one tip you guys have for event planners? Brandt, hear this question all the time, so I'm going to kick it over to you first. So while Jacqueline thinks as far as what yours is going to be, Brandt, you had one tip that you had to give event planners for planning their events in 2019. What's your one tip?
Mine is always education. It's always education. The basic education on how AV works and things like, that's my world, obviously, because it's going to take you so far to being able to have those conversations with your vendors and say, okay, why do we have this on here? Why do we have that on there? It's stuff that you and I talk about all the time, Will, because it's important to both of us. And it's part of our being transparent in the industry and being able to educate planners in how you don't have to understand the model numbers and all that kind of stuff, but just the basics of AV are going to get you so far. And Google is your friend, right? I mean, so just being able to take a couple extra minutes and looking at any kind of bid, whether it's AV or otherwise, and just doing a little bit of Googling around, not falling into the trap of I can get that linen online for X amount of dollars, but knowing how much it costs helps, to understand where we're coming from. Same kind of thing we see it in AV all the time. With I can get 40 feet of carpet for X amount. Okay, great. Drive to Home Depot and get it. Go for it. So so don't fall into those traps, but definitely educating yourself as far as just the basics of whatever it is that you might feel is a little mysterious. Go to town on it.
Amazing.
Okay, want me to answer?
Yeah, go for it, Jacqueline.
I obviously education is so important, and what you're doing here with this, I hope it's educating for those out there. I hope I didn't rifle anyone. But sometimes the education even goes back to what we started this topic with, and speaking with your tribe, your clients, your vendors, your employees. And the reason I bring this up is that the tip that we have all the time is to ask a lot of questions of who you're working with, so you're being educated by them in reference to what you're going to be doing. We ask clients so many times what they don't want to see at their event, what they don't want to feel at their event, because it's hard for them to express what they want to. So the big tip is, again, to have a live engagement with everyone that's involved with the event, which ultimately is going to give you education from the client on what they want to look and feel like, what they don't want to look and feel like, what hasn't worked in the past, what financially they want to invest, how they want to see that pricing, as well as with your vendors. We might have a vision of what we want to do, and I always joke around, if the client wants, pink balloons or green polka dots on it, no one's going to get hurt. There's nothing wrong with it. Aesthetically, we might not like it, but finding out from your client what they want and then translating that with the vendor, us as the producers, the intermediary, as the planner's planner, should really take the initiative to see how that's going to work at the event and get suggestions from your vendors. There's nothing wrong to say to your client, hey, our vendor partner that we trust on this had a great idea. It's okay. You don't have to have an ego that didn't necessarily came from you, but it came from you because it was your responsibility to do that. So that's a really big tip. I hate to say I've been around a while, but every day I learn something new in talking to a client by what they're interested in, and then that becomes interesting to us because then that's what we're servicing. And when we get a lot of times when people say, what is the one thing you'd want to ask at this conference? What would you like to learn? What keeps you up at night? For us, it's the respect of our clients for the work that we do. One thing is this pricing conversation, and the other is the value of what they're seeing that we could do. We don't want to be obsolete, but there are a lot of people with great positions at their company, at really great companies that are doing fabulous events. We want to still be their partner. Something else when you said about you're okay wearing their t-shirt, We have a big ego at our company. We're very proud. We're loud. We're New Yorker. We've done this. We're excited to do this, but have no ego about that. It's our client's event, right? And they're investing in it. And we want to make sure it's a safe environment. But again, if they want those crazy, I don't know why I keep picking on balloons today, pink balloons or green polka dots, if that's what they want, that's a tip you should take away. Give the client what they want and produce it the way you do it and get paid for it and have that respect. That's the best part about our profession.
Boom. Amazing. All right. Resources. So what are your favorite books, blogs, gadgets, apps, all that sort of stuff? Brandt never gets to ask this question. And so I'll kick it over to Brandt because I know you said that you have one that you're so, because we never get to share our resources. And we're like, oh my God, I'm so excited I get to share a resource today.
This is not super related to transparency. I'm just going to say that right now. But I think a lot of event people are going to relate to it because I was so happy when I discovered this. So anybody that ever does work in Vegas, one of the biggest complaints that I have is that almost all of the casino hotels don't put coffee makers in the rooms. And it's because they want you to leave the room and get down to the casino as fast as possible, right? So they don't want you lingering in your room making coffee. You got to get down there and get gambling on the floor. So it drives me nuts about Vegas. So I just got back from a site visit and I was like, there's got to be something I can do about it. And I found, hold on, let me get my prop.
Oh boy.
Drum roll, please.
I am opening my trusty Pelican 1510 case.
Another bonus resource.
It's the
Does
only,
it have your logo on it?
It does not. It's just so for those people that don't know, the Pelican 1510 is the one that fits in most carry-ons. So I found this, which is, let me get my.
No way. You bring a
Travel
coffee
with it?
maker with you.
This is a knockoff. Let me see if I get back here.
Oh, that's hilarious.
It is a knockoff Keurig. So it actually, you can do the pods, so you can throw the pods in your suitcase so you're not having to worry about it. You throw this in your Pelican and it's a 1 cup at a time. It's by, the company name is Chulux, Chulux, and they make a ton of these and it fits perfectly in a 1510. So that's my pick.
Okay.
Is the Chulux single serving, and
So the
single
bars.
is misspelled, coffee maker. But I've made coffee with it. And if it gets me through 1 gig, it was $30. So if it gets me through 1 gig in Vegas, it's totally worth it.
And if the client wants to buy it from you, you can tell her it's actually $30 and then decide what you're doing.
Exactly. Way to bring it around.
Jacqueline, what about you? What's your favorite resources and things you want to share with the audience? Things for them to check out.
Well, I don't drink coffee, so potentially along those lines, carry a flask with you. For me, it's sometimes beyond our own profession. So yes, we're looking at your podcast. We're all online in a lot of different industry, with feeds, etc., as well as BizBash. I have to give a shout out to BizBash. They named me one of the top 500 influencers and events this year. Their first year they ever did it. But beyond that, it's to see what's happening in the fashion world and the music world. Look at people that are not necessarily your friends and family in the events profession and see what they're doing and what they're wearing. And honestly, I love surrounding myself with millennials. If those of you know me out there, that's my thing. And really learning. I also learned they really don't read email, but that's a whole nother conversation. You have to communicate with them differently, but that is a great tool to see how people like to be communicated with. That is great education. So it's not necessarily a thing like a coffee maker, but it's really, it goes back to the education. That would be my tidbit, is just to be very open-minded. Get newsletters of things that might not, you're a tech production company, get the eater newsletters and see what's happening in restaurants out there. You might see the lighting design that's built and decide to do that for your event. So it's sort of in our profession, but not, but you're keeping up, and I hate to use the word trends, but what's new, what's hot, and maybe thinking about what's retro and cool to bring back.
Oh, amazing. I love it. Oh my gosh. You guys, so we're at the end of an episode and this has been incredible. I think the chat and everyone blowing up and having so many questions just shows how much people want to talk about this topic. So if you guys do want to continue this conversation, hashtag event icons, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, keep it going. We want to hear your guys' shout outs and everything like that. But before we wrap up the show, I have to give a big thank you to our amazing guests. Jacqueline, thank you so much for being on the show. You've been so amazing. And
Honored.
the ever studious Brandt Krueger. That's by the way, if you guys don't know why I put adjectives from Brandt's names now, you should definitely check out our new podcast, the Event Tech Podcast. A little quick plug there, where I come up with a different adjective for Brandt every single week. But you guys, thank you. You seriously so amazing. I think you guys literally just grabbed the horns of this topic and just literally showed it what's up. So thank you guys so much for being on the show. We do want to give a shout out to our other guests who have been on the show, which are basically all of you audience who asked all the amazing questions. Shout outs to Mahogany, Todd, Greg, Anthony, Mike, Mario, Roger, Matthew, Justin, Ron, Denise, Saba, Sam, Amanda, Amy, Jeff, Peter, Culture Labs, and Denise. Just some of the people out in the audience that I was able to quickly pull up a list of all of you guys. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, asking all such amazing questions. Again, if you want to continue this conversation, head over to event-icons.com. We got a ton of links. We'll have all the resources to share. The link to Brandt's coffee maker, because apparently people don't believe it was $30, all together in that one place. So go check that out. And then also join us and sign up at Event-Icons, because we'll give you an invite to our exclusive LinkedIn and Facebook groups where we're going to continue this exact conversation and debate it out a little bit further. So we'd love to see you there. But we can't wait to see you guys all next week. Next week, Wednesday, 5 p.m. Eastern. That's the place to be. I hope you guys all have an amazing day, and we'll see you guys next week on Event Icons.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for joining us for another amazing episode of #EventIcons. To catch the transcription and all of the resources mentioned, head to www.helloendless.com/blog. This week's episode will be posted and available by next Tuesday. Also, let us know what you thought about this week's episode. Share your biggest takeaway.
And join the social conversation. Sponsored by Little Bird Told Media.
Just tag your post with #EventIcons. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you again for joining us. We'll see you next Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern, right here on #EventIcons.